I think that's probably everyone we're going to get for the time being here. Thanks all for joining me today. My name is Larry Hill with Full 360. And we're going to be talking about Oracle Hyperion in the cloud. Now I'm going to do a quick survey here beforehand, just because there was a slight typo in the catalog as it was published, the print version, that changed EPM into ERP. How many people are here to hear about ERP? Okay, the good news is EPM is a subset of ERP. And all the lessons that we've got to share today and the experience apply equally to the ERP world, the general ledger, payables, and so forth, as they do to EPM, which is performance management, which is all the analytics that typically sit on top of a financial system. So you're in luck here. Now, a couple other questions. How many people here are current users of Amazon, have applications up and running on Amazon? Looks like about 2/3, yep. And how many of those are Hyperion applications? Oh, we've got one. Okay, good. It's one of the issues that I'll address here is that Hyperion's been a little bit late and slow to the cloud, and there's some good reasons for moving. So, talk a little bit about the agenda today, just give you a very brief background on myself and my company, Full 360 in New York. Talk about the state of Hyperion in 2012. Why would you want to run your Hyperion applications in the cloud? Give you some use cases, some good examples of how it works and how it works well. Some of the experiences of our clients who are currently running in the cloud, and then we'll hopefully have a few minutes for Q&A at the end if there are some things that I didn't cover you're looking for in a little bit more detail. Now, Full 360 is a systems integrator and consultancy. We're based in the New York area. We've been doing Hyperion applications for about 15 years now. We're experts in the S-base, the planning, Hyperion financial management applications that make up sort of the core of Oracle's Hyperion EPM suite. We do analytic data warehousing and BI, all of the analytics. There's usually a large data warehouse behind any Hyperion application just to feed it the kind of data that the CFO and the financial people are looking for in their analysis. And we were an inaugural partner of Amazon's, an inaugural solution provider back in 2007. Very early on, we saw the potential, the great potential for Hyperion applications running in the cloud. And so we first put images of S-base and planning and so forth up on Amazon in 2009. Our clients have ranged, we started out primarily in the financial services industry, all the big banks, the usual suspects, FTSE 10. Now it's a fairly wide mix from Qantas in Australia, American Airlines, a whole mix. Primarily driven by different companies getting onto the cloud, and in some cases with Hyperion. So let's take a look at Hyperion in 2012. It's the leader in performance management or analytics that sit on top of financial systems. It consists mostly, the base is a multidimensional database called S-base. That's the reason that Oracle bought Hyperion in 2007 was to get S-base, and they've used it as the engine for all of the analytic apps that followed, like the planning application, financial consolidation. It does all the analytics for the HFM application and is the basis for reporting and analysis sort of across the board for Oracle Financials. However, it's S-base being a multidimensional database where it pre-calculates all of the various possibilities that you could have, all the data intersections, all the questions you could possibly ask. It pre-calculates it. So it can tend to take a lot of resources to do a cube. I mean, we've had clients, in the past where just due to a little bit of a misconfiguration, cubes were taking 24 hours to calculate, and they could be 50 or 100 gigabytes in size. So that's something that we tend to address here. Part of the issue in solving that problem is that Oracle for a long time has had a fairly hard line against VMware. They see it as a completely different operating system and really don't want to support it. Now there's movement today in that issue. I understand there's some beta clients out there who are officially supported on VMware now with Hyperion applications. But Suffice it to say, it's limited VMware as a solution for performance issues with Hyperion, with EPM applications. There's also a background largely stemming from the next issue I'll cover here, but there's been a conflict in priorities for many years between finance and IT. You probably don't need Hyperion applications to know that, but Hyperion has been sort of a focal point of it, because whereas finance may be looking for peak performance on their applications during the close periods, IT is looking for cost control and is not going to go buy a huge server just for certain peak periods. Finance is looking for critical system response. When you're trying to close the books, you need to close the books. And if you have to go out to the street tomorrow with them, you're going to stay all night tonight closing the books. So you don't really want to hear about putting a problem ticket into the help desk to get something solved the night before you got a report. You need very much more direct and fast response. And finance has always complained about their limited view, the ability to see into the systems and know exactly what's going on. Further that, Hyperion, just applications in general, are a horse of a different color for IT. They are not, it's not relational, it's not SQL, it's something completely different. And that's always been frustrating for IT departments that look to take a good tech and sort of apply them to the Hyperion stack, and confusion ensues because it is just completely different. It's script-based, it's got its own ETL, there's no version control or change management the same way that IT is typically used to. So the administrative skills are really not applicable or transferable from mainline SQL relational database world over to Hyperion. So sort of as a consequence of all of this, the Hyperion adoption in the cloud, as we've seen just really from one user in the cloud, is lagging. But there's a good reason to make a move. The background is IT, in large cases, most of you who are here today, are either experimenting on the cloud, or you got your first applications, or you've gone whole hog up onto Amazon. But with other applications, Hyperion hasn't been that leading edge application that's been used to experiment or first go into production on the cloud. Finance, CFOs in particular, have got security concerns. I mean, the analysis, the financial results of a company are in many ways the family jewels. Unless you're a hedge fund in New York and you're protecting algorithms for trading, what's more important than the details behind your financials, especially before they're released to the street. So for all of those reasons, Hyperion is lagging in its migration to the cloud. So the question is today, why would you run Hyperion, or in a larger sense your ERP applications up in the cloud? What's really to be gotten from it? So there's a number of them. And first we'll address what is more of an issue than a requirement, which is security. Those of you that saw the keynote today, you can see how seriously Amazon takes security issues. I mean, I like to joke it's the first 3 questions that we always have to deal with when talking to a company about going to the cloud. Is, okay, what about security? Well, what about security? But how about security? I mean, seriously, security? So that takes a little while to get through. Amazon actually has a cadre of specialists who just work with IT departments primarily in building the case and proving out that the security is good. So there is a good story. I'll cover it a little bit here. The next step, the next couple sort of this is not really in a priority order. Lower cost, absolutely. You've seen the IDC studies out there and so forth. There's a great case to be made for lowering your costs on the cloud. Agility is an important one. That ability to move faster and more effectively than either traditional technology or organizations are able to move. Elasticity, the cloud speak for flexibility in all directions, being able to add resources wherever you need them, right when you need them, and not have to buy them or plan them 2 months in advance. Worldwide reach is one for those of you out there who work for international companies. The ability to put something in Tokyo easily and manage it. And then there's sort of an added benefit of the shared control between finance and IT that takes some of the issues of between finance and IT out of the equation and actually can make for a little bit of a happier life. So I'll deal with each of those in order here, starting with security. many of you, if you've watched the keynote this morning, or really probably any Amazon presentation that is put in front of you, it starts with security. And Amazon has gone to very great lengths to support all of the standards out there. The SAS 70 that's turned into SOC, type 1 or 1 and type 2, the ISO, the payment card industry, FISMA for the feds, HIPAA for healthcare. They really have gone way out of their way to support all of these because there's a lot of applications that simply can't run in the cloud unless you support these. If you've ever, you want to have some fun sometime with your Amazon rep, ask them for a tour of one of the data centers and see how politely they say no. You can't go there. They don't publish the addresses. You can't get into one of their data centers. They are so locked down. There's 23 of them around the United States right now, and you would not know where they are. And they take that physical security, to a very deep level, right down to the point of, destroying disk drives rather than throwing them away when they're at their end of useful life. Then you get into the hardware, the software, the networking. Suffice it to say here, this is the kind of security is a topic that you could spend an entire day on. That actually, Amazon specialists are willing to spend, along with us, if we're not enough to make the case, to go through the entire case at whatever length necessary to convince typically your IT department that the data is going to be safe on the cloud. So three basic categories that we think apply best to the Hyperion world, and really just one of them is the main play for Hyperion is sufficient. The direct connect, if you don't want to trust your data over the internet, Amazon can connect your data center up directly with them, leased line, very secure. Use your encryption, their encryption. The virtual private cloud I'll talk about a little bit more in just a minute, because we think that applies very nicely to the Hyperion use case. Or dedicated instances, which is getting back into sort of a colo kind of a world, and frankly ruins some of the cost savings that you can achieve in the cloud, and we don't think is necessary for the Hyperion world. What we do like to focus on is the virtual private cloud, which is like many things in the Amazon cloud, it's just a service. It's something you turn on, and with maybe a day's worth of setup, you're able to take your firewall, your own internal IT security standards, and just extend them out into the Amazon cloud. So your single sign-on, your users, and this is very important with many applications running up in Amazon, your users cannot tell that they're running in somebody else's data center. That's sort of the watchword for Amazon. Unless you really want the users to know that's where they're running, they can't tell. They run just the same, security's the same. What is different, and is kind of a nice benefit, is the whole backup and disaster recovery strategy is a lot easier in the cloud. Rather than going to great lengths of hot sites and spending double on hardware and all of the approaches that have been taken in the last 10 years or so, all you do in Amazon is take a snapshot of your application, the operating system, the application, and the disk, and you can store that to a different data center, and then bring that application back up from a different data center if the primary one goes down. So it's a very simple approach. If you're making changes to that database, they can be stored, just the changed blocks in the disk are stored again to the other data center, and then can be restored as part of a recovery strategy. You can also selectively back your files up to S3, and we all saw the little price decrease out there. I don't know if you all have also seen the Glacier announcement. Sorry, question?
So that's another data understanding to a separate data center in the same availability zone. It's not across availability zones in terms of moving data.
It actually could be either way. It's a little easier and more efficient to do it within availability zones because Amazon does a good job of separating the data centers within a region. They're sometimes 5-10 miles away from each other, separate electricity, separate water, all the sources. So it's very unlikely that both of them would be affected by any sort of a natural outage.
But could I move it to a different region, like between Amazon directly without taking it out and putting it back?
Ah.
So that's what I'm asking. So if I'm in the U.S. West,
Yep.
U.S. East,
Yep.
but I want my other guy to be in the U.S. West, so I realize I can move the data around
Yep.
in S3 within the U.S. East region.
Yep. I don't know, I've got one of my technicians in the back there. I'm going to go for a nod, yes or no.
Yeah, that's good. We have a whole framework we use for managing all of this stuff. We're not just using standard tools. We've actually built our own management framework around it. And this is the kind of thing that, well, I don't think we've done this yet, but I know we would be able to do that. We do a lot with resizing volumes and manipulating volumes. We could definitely make it so we could copy a volume from one region to another. But that's, would that
You actually do that within the Amazon world, or you take it out of the Google?
Oh, no, within the Amazon world, you basically create two volumes, copy them together. But, you know, for our customers, that would be a transparent process that we handle from our management perspective.
Yeah, so the general answer is yes, but with some setup. And that's something we can help you with. So you may have heard, I mean, in recent history, there have been a couple of outages. A couple of Amazon data centers have taken hits. It's gone through multiple levels of redundancy and has actually affected the performance of those data centers. There's been 3 of them in the last 2 years. Each time it was just a single data center, a single, what Amazon calls an availability zone, that was affected. Our clients were essentially unaffected. A couple of them didn't even notice it went down. We had it back up and running in the background. Most were down for less than an hour. One that took a lot of recovery had been doing a lot of changes to its database, and there was a lot of blocks that had been changed. Took a little under 4 hours to reconstruct. But the whole backup strategy, which is not hard to either put in place or enable when you really need it, is one of the huge advantages of Amazon. You want to put a backup in, Tokyo. You want to put one in Sydney. You want to hide one out on the West Coast. I mean, put it anywhere you want. Great amount of flexibility for backup and recovery. So let's talk a little bit about lower cost. You've heard from the Amazon folks, on-demand instance, fairly hefty server, $1.50 an hour. That's it. Run it for 2 hours, it's $3. When you get to the point of running it for more than half of a year, it makes sense to make a commitment to a 1-year reserved instance, and you cut your cost by about 47%. So real easy to move from 26 an hour to 16 cents an hour with a little bit up front. And disk is approaching a negligible level in terms of cost at $100 per terabyte per month. I've had, in quotes that I've shared with people, I've heard the comment before, well, this price looks like about the same as I pay for a server, if I was just to go out to buy it. And there's one big difference, is that you're not just buying a server, you're buying the entire infrastructure. So you're running a server that's been purchased, installed, configured, and is maintained, all for the same price that you might be able to get a commodity server for in the marketplace. And the studies that you've seen, like with International Data Corp, say that anywhere from 30 to 50% of the total cost of a data center is in the overhead, is in the maintenance. It's not in buying the servers. There's about double the cost in actually installing them, maintaining them, upgrading them, versions, software versions, and so forth. So there's a great space for savings in there. I'll give you an example of, ooh, excuse me. I'm gonna have to cough up. Large bank in New York City came to us about 1.5 years ago with 4 very large servers. This particular bank is very good at total costing of their infrastructure. They know exactly what the fully loaded overhead, based cost of those servers were. It was $360,000 a year. We did a simple configuration on Amazon. It was 40. It was a 89% savings. The guy we gave the proposal to said, "Oh, this is great. I did some analysis on this. I can save $1 million over 3 years with this. This is beautiful." And he took it up to the managing director level, where it completely disappeared. Because somebody up there who's in charge of infrastructure buy said, "Are you telling me that my $2 billion spend in the last 3 years was 90% overpriced? I don't think I really want to do this." And it just completely disappeared. Very curious. $1 million worth of savings like that in 3 years. So the savings are absolutely there to be had. You can bring your own Hyperion license up to the cloud. It's all server-based. The way Oracle does it right now, it's all user-based, I should say. So if you want to point it at this server versus that server, they don't care where they run. It's real easy to do. I will say that those of you that may have taken a look at Oracle On Demand or their new cloud planning application, Amazon compares very, very favorably, in terms of pricing. A couple of the initial comparisons that we've done at various clients, Oracle On Demand is about 3 times as expensive as putting your own image up there with full 360 service. So it's, and that price is coming down. It's probably only twice as expensive now. But that's a lot of money when it gets down to it. And for those of you that, there's a great total cost of ownership calculator on the Amazon website. So you can do some rough modeling around, approximating what it would cost to move to the cloud, and then you can move into a more detailed level. They've got spreadsheets and so forth to get down to server by server. Real quick example here. Typical Hyperion, server, 4 CPU, 15 gig. If you bought that, you buy it by the hour, it's 92 cents an hour. That's all each. Run you on a full year basis, $24,000 for 3 of them. Make a 1-year commitment, price goes down to $13,000, it's about 46% off. Make a 3-year commitment, it goes down to $10,000 and change. So what we typically say to our clients is, hey, start off on demand. Even if you were to use the scenario where maybe you run it 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, and then just 10 hours a day on the weekends, cut about half the hours out, it's about the same cost as the 1-year reserved instance. But you're turning it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off constantly. Have a question there at the back?
Just real quick, I came in a little bit late, so I may have not caught the first part of the presentation. In the slide before, you were talking about Oracle On Demand.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Oracle's cloud?
Well, it's actually 2 different things. Okay. They've got something they're calling their cloud, and then another thing they're calling Oracle On Demand.
So it's like Oracle Software as a Service?
Yeah.
And the Oracle cloud is more like Oracle Infrastructure as a Service with Oracle licenses?
Yeah, I don't know how general purpose they've gone. I don't know that they're doing non-Oracle applications. The Oracle Cloud, they seem to be bringing up individual applications. Like for the EPM suite, the first one that they did was planning. Okay. And they've said that that's going to be in beta for at least a year.
So just to catch back up, what you're saying about the Oracle On Demand, which is Oracle Software as a Service, that is about 3 times more expensive than...
They're the first bids that we saw. It's Larry Ellison style. They're skimming the cream off the top at a high price point to be, the 80 to 90% profit margins that Andy was talking about today. That's a good example.
So they're getting us there, but if you bring your own, now you can order Oracle licenses right out of the
Yeah, so you can run, it's just like a data center. Now we have an offering that I can talk to you about afterwards that provides images of all of the whole EPM suite up on Amazon ready to go. So that's a nice vehicle, but it's not rocket science. If you have people who can install on Windows or on Linux, do it yourself. It's just another server in a remote data center. Hi, sir, question here? Okay, sure. You know what? I'll have an email address at the end here. These are all going to be available, all the slideshows. There's nothing confidential in here, so if you want one quickly before they get it up and running, come on up and give me your card, and I'll send it to you. I'm more than happy to. We had a question in the back here too. There's some conversion. It's not a one-to-one. Yeah. Yeah, actually, we've built some routines. We've built a little system to make it easier, because that's one of the first use cases that we see is I'm on VMware, I want to back up on the cloud. I want to develop on the cloud, I'd like to move it down to VMware. So we've actually written some code to make that easier than it is. It can be. That's one of the use cases that I'll get into a little bit later. So, so pricing, and this is a subset. These are sort of the usual suspects in terms of the servers, the instances that you might use on Amazon for Hyperion, but there's no restriction. You probably wouldn't want to put it on one of their GPU units, but there's a lot of horsepower to be had on Amazon. One good example of companies that are using that, the older instances, the 1 gigahertz or 1 ECU, as Amazon likes to talk about performance. instances that are still, or physical servers that are still, used inside Amazon, they'll rent them to you for 2 cents an hour. This hedge fund in New York City said, great, I'll take 3,000 a night and run all of my risk management applications, and I'll do way more risk analysis than I would have if I had to buy a $10 million data center just to do that every night. So they come in and they grab 3,000 instances, and it costs them $60 an hour. And they're laughing. Because, and this is so many times you run into this kind of a comparison in Amazon where the cost is just so different. Literally, you'd need a $5 or $10 million data center to run 3,000 servers, and a bunch of people taking care of it. So they come in, they grab 3,000 a night, and then at night, after that for reporting, they back off to 300. And it costs them $6 an hour. It's almost approaching zero in terms of cost for a financial company whose viability is based on the ability to make sure that they're not taking too much risk. So let's talk a little bit about elasticity here. Some of you might have seen a slide that looks like this. Amazon's basic premise, a case that says if you have to buy your server capacity in big chunks, you're going to go back and forth between not using enough of it so that you've got an opportunity cost, or not having enough of it and having your users be angry at you because response time's gone to pieces. In the Hyperion world, we think it looks a little bit more like this, because in the financial world, really, you have peaks that are all period ends. Month-end close, quarter-end close, year-end close. So you get, sorry, I jumped by it. Did I jump by it? There. You got a number of quarterly peaks, then you got a big one at the year end. So most IT departments find it difficult to justify peak period horsepower for these users. So they buy just enough so that it's a little slow during the close. And the closes are agonizing, for the finance department. You have, substantial, it minimizes it to say user dissatisfaction during those peak periods. So what Amazon brings to you is that, that elasticity, that ability to add processing power exactly when you need it, and then give it back when you don't need it. So the example I like to use is if you upgraded from one of those previous instances I was talking about, a 4-way with 15 gig of memory, doubled this to 8 cores and went up to 68 gig of memory, which is a screaming instance for any Hyperion application, unless you got 5,000 users on it. Then you might need 2. That upgrade is $1.93 an hour. You do that for 10 hours a day, for 20 days of the close, it costs you less than $500, which means you make 50, 100, 200 people more productive during the entire close for less than $500. That is a no-brainer. That is the central point of the case for moving your Hyperion applications to the cloud. The ability to throw that kind of horsepower at it for what approaches zero in terms of cost in comparison to your entire finance department and getting your numbers out to the street, day earlier, 2 days earlier? And people don't have to work 12 hours a day? It's a no-brainer. So moving from elasticity very closely related is agility, that ability to provision hardware, computing resources without any delay. It lets you do things like sandboxes. Hey, we just thought of a variation we want to do on one of our models. Let's spin up another server and try it out. Quick sandbox. Takes 10 minutes. Just-in-time infrastructure. we've got a new application coming on and somebody forgot to order the servers and it's going to be 2 months. Disaster. It's not the scenario with Amazon. It's like, okay. It's like the guy who was landing, the Mars lander today. He just got on there and he fired up another server and saved the day. It's easy. It's quick and it's not that expensive. So you also have a very simplified development environment. Instead of the usual development, test, QA, prod, that whole, and you got to have 4 times the servers that you need. In the Amazon world, you got a development server. When you're happy with it and you want to test it, you make a snapshot, try it out. If it works, you throw the old one away and that becomes your development. You want to do some QA on it? Do it on that instance or spin up another one for an hour or 2 or a day. So you don't need 4 times redundancy in your whole hardware configuration in order to do a proper job at testing. You want to test a copy? Make a copy. Test it, throw it away. Very easy. So some of the examples there, you want to put up a new version of Essbase Cube, in an afternoon. Do you want to run a couple of different versions, the old version and the new version of Hyperion at the same time? Applies equally to the ERP systems. You can archive old versions. People love to know that they can get back to an analysis that they did 3 years ago without having to completely reconstruct the thing. Take a snapshot, store it off at 2 cents, a gigabyte per month, and use it if you ever need it. Don't if you don't. Even personal Essbase cubes for heavy users, and I've got one of our clients actually has done that. Talk for a minute about global reach. You've seen the map of Amazon around the world. Data centers pretty much everywhere you need them. Edge locations to make performance if you're not in a data center city very, very snappy. How that applies to Hyperion users is it gives you the ability to geographically distribute it Hyperion. For example, if you want to do, if you've got regions around the world that do their planning a little bit differently, give them each a planning system and consolidate it centrally. It's all from the Amazon console. You don't have to have somebody in Tokyo running the thing. You run it from here. Simple to do. Essbase cubes, very response time. When a company's got its an entire expense model up in a cube, and you got people in the controller's office that are hitting that thing looking for sub-second response time because they're doing analysis all day long, response time's a big deal. Put the cube closer to the users. Financial consolidations. You can do it by region. It's easy now. You don't have to have a little data center in all the different places you want to put an HFM instance. Even do local dashboards. Dashboards are notoriously heavy, because they're doing 15 queries in the background to give you a dashboard. Put the processing close to the users. So the result is you might have a worldwide enterprise, but effectively you've got local applications with centralized savings and control. It's the best of both worlds. So a little bit about finance and IT here again. The good news is the cloud, Amazon in particular, really reduces the structural limitations that are a lot of what pisses off finance about IT. IT's got a lot of procedures and processes because everything goes to pieces if you're not procedural about it. The problem is the process often takes too long. Now, if you can go get a server in an afternoon, that takes a lot of the issue out of the equation and lets IT be a lot more responsive to a finance operation, because they don't have to do all of what Amazon likes to call this heavy lifting. All that you got to decide what vendor to buy, and they're all fighting over it. Installation, configuration, all the management of the servers, the disks, the networks, forecasting long term, all that stuff is, no, when are we going to need it? Next week? Okay, fine, we'll spin one up. So it also makes managed services viable. And many of you out there, if you're Hyperion users, even in some cases the ERP users, you find that it doesn't take a full body, full FTE all month long just to administer Hyperion. So there's been an advent of managed services in the Hyperion space where companies will provide somebody a fractional FTE so that finance organizations don't have to buy an entire person to do maybe a third of a month's worth of work. So some use cases, sandboxes. There's a new version. There's always a new version out there of applications. Want to spin it up and play with it tomorrow? It's easy to do if you're on the Amazon cloud. You want instant development capability? Somebody comes up with a brainstorm. You don't have to go into it's going to take 2 months to get a server, and we really, it's going to be too late by then. Spin up a server. For production applications, you lower your costs year-round. Heavy-duty production, you can probably throw, more horsepower at it, even on an average, than a peak, than you could if you're paying the full freight of a data center. As I mentioned, you can add temporary capacity for those spiky applications, and all finance applications tend to be spiky in terms of resource requirement. You can even take a cube that's a big, big cube and put it on a gigantic processor for an hour for $2 to calculate it, and then put it on a smaller one for analysis, because it doesn't take as much horsepower to actually run a cube as it does to calculate it. Easy to make those switches back and forth. On-demand recovery and automatic snapshots we talked about a little bit. Even training makes great platform for either in-house training or via vendor. And actually, I'll talk about the third one down here, 123 OLAP, leading Hyperion training vendor out there for several years now, has used our instances to spin up classes, because you don't have to. The big issue for training for so long was you have a perfect configuration, and then new users make a mess out of it for a day, and then you got to reset the whole thing for the next class. On the cloud, you just stop the instance, and it goes away, and you fire up a perfect copy tomorrow from your base, from your template. Very easy. Added benefit there is that they can do a class during a day or a week, and then leave a copy behind for the client to continue their own training. Very easy to do. Large American airline in the Midwest, huge maintenance and engineering operation where they do a lot of planning and forecasting with Essbase. This was literally I like to say, a closet to cloud situation, because this server was in the Hyperion admin's office closet, running like with a fan blowing at it. And, how many, governance and other violations there were involved in that, but they essentially couldn't get it out of there quickly enough once management realized where it lived. Pretty easy to move it to the cloud and build all sorts of backup and recovery around it, using a lot of our best practices. It was a major violation in audit, in the audit that is coming up at the end of this year. Consulting companies. I get a call or two a week from companies that's saying, listen, we have a client. We're either trying to save a situation where they got behind, or we're just looking to do some temporary development. Let's put an instance up. Sure. Takes an afternoon at relatively low cost. Media services company in New York, actually, it's one of the few, it's Essbase as a service for media buy planning. And we've just finishing this week, moving them up to the cloud and beefing up the performance, increasing the versions and so forth. A lot of flexibility when you're operating in the cloud. So if you all would be interested in giving a try both at either an Hyperion application or the Amazon cloud, or both at the same time. I don't know if you've heard of Amazon's Test Lab program, where there's a particular page. If you just Google AWS Test Lab, you'll go right to the page. Whole range of Hyperion applications up there, and what they'll do is they'll let you fire up an instance with that application running on it on Amazon. They'll give you a script, and it's a 1 to 2 hour exercise of going through the application and trying it yourself, and it is a live copy of the application. Full 360's got a copy of Hyperion Planning up that way, and we've got plans to put a couple more up. But it's a great way to both see what it takes. You get on the console, you fire up your instance, you connect to it, and you run planning, and you have a script that takes you through a planning exercise with a report at the end, and you can get a good feel of what it's like to use Hyperion Planning on the cloud, which incidentally is not very different from using Hyperion Planning in your own data center, except it might run a little faster and be a little less expensive. So take a look at ours as well, but there's a whole page of Hyperion applications out there. As a matter of fact, I think the next step in these test labs is SAP Financials. So if you have SAP Financials out there, you'll see some of those showing up. So finally, why do you want to move Hyperion to the cloud? Well, it's safe. It really is safe. In some cases, it's safer than maybe your own data center. It's flexible. It's not hard to do. It's cheaper. It's faster in a number of different ways. And frankly, in our opinion, in 5 years, most Hyperion users are going to be up there. As I said, it's a no-brainer. So appreciate your listening today. If you have any we'll do some questions here, and then I'll jump back to my contacts there. And again, if anyone would like a copy of the slides, just come on, give me go back to that. Yeah. So we're officially back in questions here. If anybody's got, I know we've had a couple during the session, but if anyone has questions that they would like recorded, 3, 2, 1, and I guess I'm all done. Thank you very much.